MB Friends presents an introduction to the idealist temperament. Part 2, Idealists in Relationships.
Idealists approach mating quite differently from the other three temperaments. In their own ways, the other types tend to be realistic about mating, which is to say that artisans, guardians, and rationals assume their mates to be fallible, and they will go along with a good deal of compromise in making their marriages work. Idealists, on the other hand, are singularly idealistic about choosing a mate, and most often take up the romantic task of seeking the perfect mate and the ideal relationship, what they call the love of their life or their one true love, joined with them in a match made in heaven and creating a love timeless and eternal. In other words, idealists are looking for more than life partners in their mates. They want soul partners, persons with whom they can bond in some special spiritual sense, sharing their complex inner lives and communicating intimately about what most concerns them, their feelings and their causes, their romantic fantasies and their ethical dilemmas, their inner division and their search for happiness. Idealists firmly believe in such deep and meaningful relationships. They will settle for nothing less, and in some cases they try to create them where they don't exist. The idealists desire that their relationships be deep and meaningful, that is, intense, enduring, and all-important in their lives, is very much in evidence in the way they go about dating. They do not usually choose to play that field to any great extent, but prefer to go out with one person at a time, and to explore the potential for special closeness in each relationship. Never casual or occasional about dating, they typically look past surface relations to more deeply felt connections, and they lose interest rather quickly with dates which center around social events and physical activities. Finding the rare person with whom they can share their inner world is difficult for idealists, a painful process of trial and error, and often they vow not to date at all for periods of time rather than go through the search. For NFS, dating someone means more than physical fun or social experience. It is an opening of their heart and mind to the other person, in some cases a baring of their soul, and carries with it both a promise and an expectation of deep regard and mutual understanding.
However, once the special person comes their way, the man or woman of their dreams, idealists can be carried away with their feelings and give almost all their attention to pursuing the relationship. For the NF, not just a compatible marriage but an all-consuming, undying passion is in the offing, and so the courtship becomes the center of his or her world. Idealists have a flair for dramatizing their courtships, and they spare no effort or flight of imagination to win the heart of their loved one. Often a storybook flavor permeates their courtship behavior, and NFs are not afraid of using imaginative language, even poetry and quotations, to give voice to their feelings. Idealists are highly emotional people, in the sense that their emotions are both easily aroused and quickly discharged. Fortunately, they tend to be positive types, and so their emotional intensity is usually expressed as unbounded enthusiasm, particularly when discussing ideas or sharing personal insights. Their display of enthusiasm can be both delightful and contagious, often making them inspiring figures in their groups. However, when frustrated in their idealism, or when treated unjustly, idealists can become quickly irritated and they will respond furiously. The fire of their enthusiasm suddenly flaring out in anger. In the early stages of a romance, both NF males and females are likely to be blind to flaws in their beloved, and to believe in the illusion that life together will proceed happily ever after, although the details of this happily ever after are rarely explored in depth. Idealists hold dear a compelling though often vague inner vision of what their ideal mate will be like. And they tend to project this vision of perfection into their all-too-human loved ones. Needless to say, most human beings cannot live up to such romantic ideals. Many artisans react with good-natured sarcasm, many guardians seem impatient with such foolishness. And the rational view of this attribution of soulfulness is often skeptical at best. Idealists who attempt to make their loved ones live up to their ideals are sooner or later faced with disillusionment in their relationships. Curiously, it appears that female idealists are able to sustain the romanticism invested in a relationship longer than male idealists. After the physical side of the relationship has lost its mystery, some male NFs can become disinterested and hunger after another fantasy, feeling compelled, if only in their imaginations, to pursue the dream of a larger-than-life goddess who will satisfy all their desires and be wife, mother, and mistress to them. The male idealist is most vulnerable to seeking variety through searching out a new person to love, and thus a danger he faces is that he will move from relationship to relationship, rather than make the necessary effort to develop the one he has. The female idealist does not as often demonstrate this loss of interest. On the contrary, she is likely to increase her dedication after the physical relationship is consummated. She becomes more and more devoted, continuing to romanticize the relationship and to believe in its perfection, to give small transactions profound significance, to dramatize ordinary interactions with her mate, to be willing, like so many NF fictional characters, to die for love. She seldom seems disappointed in the sexual act. Orgasmic response on her part can be seen as secondary compared with the more selfless pleasure of giving herself body and soul to her mate. And she can satisfy herself by exploring the emotional intimacy of sexual intercourse. Idealists are apt to follow their innermost feelings and personal religious convictions, and thus will consider themselves married when they're sure that deep bonding has taken place with their mates, and when private words of devotion have been exchanged. Once married, both NF females and males seem to have their antennae always alert to what others are feeling, especially when this involves hurt and conflict, and they characteristically respond to their mates with kindness, tenderness, and unconditional love. An idealist private conversations are often liberally sprinkled with terms of endearment and with frequent, passionate expressions of love, both verbal and non-verbal. Giving hugs and saying I love you are often a natural part of their interaction with their mates and children. It is undoubtedly the idealist who is the most loving, dedicated, affectionate, and appreciative mate, and is unstinting in the expression of these emotions. And yet such emotional sensitivity, some would say hypersensitivity, can take its toll, and idealists have been known to become upset when these affective ties begin to bind, as they do when the amount of emotional input from their mates becomes a psychological overload. NFs report that, at times, they find their emotional circuits so overloaded with their own concerns that they cannot deal positively with the emotional experiences of others who are especially close to them, particularly when those experiences are negative or unhappy.
In much the same way, idealists may have difficulty freeing themselves from the demands of their careers in order to preserve time for their families, especially if their jobs involve working closely with others in personal development, teaching, counseling, pastoring, and the like. Idealists can become so wrapped up in the problems and progress of their students, clients, or parishioners that they may neglect their mates and their family priorities. Whoever is there and demanding time gets it, even though their loved ones may be waiting elsewhere. Idealists often have to learn how to detach themselves from their personal involvements away from home, to make sure they give their mates and families first importance in their lives. Still, the large majority of NFs find their greatest satisfaction in developing one special relationship, and they structure much of their lives around their homes and families. NFs are imaginative and creative around the house, their homes usually filled with a great variety of music and art, along with cherished personal items, family photographs, spiritual icons and everywhere books, not only books of philosophy and poetry, but books on religion and mysticism, personal growth, novels of all kinds, and often children's books. Idealists are generally skilled socially, and people usually feel wanted and well hosted in their homes. Expressive NFs are likely to be socially active, becoming involved, and hoping to involve their spouses, in a variety of cultural and personal development programs, such as great books courses, drama groups, and film societies. And they will also join discussion groups, taking up vital social issues and current trends in education, psychology, religion, literature, and so on. Reserved NFs keep more to themselves and their immediate loved ones, and tend to make cave-like private spaces in their homes, where they read voraciously, and contemplate the mysteries of life, although they will actively support the arts and humanities in their communities, attending concerts, plays, poetry readings, and other cultural events, expressive or reserved. However, NFs are spontaneously thoughtful with their family members, usually remembering birthdays, anniversaries, and such without being prompted, or at most needing only a hint. If, in turn, their own special days are forgotten, idealists can be deeply hurt, as deeply as they are appreciative when theirs are noticed. Idealist and artisan. Idealists thoroughly enjoy their artisan mates' freedom and spontaneity in the real world, and they admire the ease with which SPs can live artfully in the moment. So different from their own often torn, conscience-stricken experience of life. Also, the sensuality and sexual boldness of SP mates can intrigue NFs and fire their romantic imaginations. However, there is one potent seed of dissatisfaction in these NF-SP marriages, namely, the lack of interest that SPs have in talking of their inner lives. When an idealist speaks of the true self, of transcendental meditation, or of deep consciousness, their artisan mates do not really understand, and cannot offer much enthusiasm or insight on such abstract topics. And, sadly, it is from this seed that Pygmalion projects grow in these relationships. As the idealist partners try with all their imaginative might to cultivate a heightened inner awareness in their artisan mates.
Idealist and guardian. With guardian mates, idealists find a comfortable, reassuring stability and dependability in the home, traits which can help give the somewhat scattered NFs a feeling of solid earth beneath their feet. SJs also have a firmly fixed moral center, a sure sense of right and wrong, that idealists, so often of two minds about moral issues, deeply respect. And idealists and guardians are both social cooperators, which diffuses a lot of conflict over following, or at least respecting, the rules and laws that govern everyday life. Yet here again guardians have trouble sharing the rich inner lives of idealists, and can disappoint their NF mates' deep longing for soulful bonding and romantic sexuality. The guardian might listen dutifully to the idealist's flights of imagination, and might try to be more fanciful and passionate in order to please the NF, but sooner or later the SJ feels unappreciated and begin to resist the force of the NF's Pygmalion project, and the result can be head-on battles. Idealist and idealist. Idealists have much less trouble with mates of their own temperament, and idealists often get along exceptionally well with other idealists. Two NFs can find deep-felt satisfaction, sharing each other's inner world and exploring each other's personal development, although if the pair are too much alike in their ethical concerns, or pursue the same spiritual goals for too long a time, they can become rather narrowly devoted to the pilgrim's journey and tire themselves out along the way. In addition, two empathic NFs can create a wonderfully intimate bond, for a time, but eventually such mutual interjection can also invade each partner's privacy. Constantly getting into each other's skin can result in getting on each other's nerves. Idealist and rational. The choice of a rational mate seems to hold the best promise of success for idealists. The basis of their compatibility is that NFs and NTs both live primarily in the world of abstract concepts, the world of theories and possibilities, of insights and symbols. After dating more down-to-earth, literal-minded artisans and guardians, an idealist's first encounter with a rational can be a revelation, putting the NF in touch with a new and intriguing type of person, someone eager and able, like the NF, to dream the world, to build castles in the air, and to see far distances with the mind's eye. Also fascinating is the rational's calmness and autonomy, two characteristics which give the NT a strength of character, a firm grasp of who they are, that the easily ruffled, soul-searching NF greatly admires, and would like to emulate. These idealist-rational relationships do not always remain harmonious, of course. Conflicts of NF emotional expressiveness against anti-self-control, of NF intuition against anti-logic, and of NF ethical or humanitarian concerns against anti-technical pragmatics can prove challenging in even the best idealist-rational marriages. Indeed, NFs often come to regard their NT mates' resistance to expressing emotion, their seemingly aloof rationality, and their preference for what works over what's right as barriers to be broken down, or at least chipped at with Pygmalion's chisel. But while sparks might fly, or maybe because of the sparks, idealists take to rationals as to no other temperament. Now, In theory, such idealist rational compatibility should reach its peak when particular couples complement each other in the expressive or reserved social attitude, EI, and in making schedules or probing for options, JP. In the next and final video of the Idealist series, we will explore the idealist's childhood, adulthood, and leadership. As always, please remember that learning about an individual's temperament is only a starting point, not ending point, to learning about that unique individual.
The source content of this video is Please Understand Me Too by David Gersey. For more information, please go to mbfriends.com.